Picture the scene. It's the House of Commons, mid-20th century. Lady Nancy Astor, the first female MP to take her seat, is absolutely furious with Winston Churchill. She looks him dead in the eye and says, "Winston, if you were my husband, I'd poison your tea."
And the room goes silent. That is a loaded gun of a statement. Most of us in that moment would probably just stutter or say something weak like, "Well, that's not very nice."
Exactly. But Churchill doesn't miss a beat. He looks back at her and replies, "Nancy, if you were my wife, I'd drink it."
It's devastating. It's perfect, and it's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, how do some people do that? Is it a superpower? Because most of us are living in that agonizing reality where we think of the perfect line 3 hours later while we're brushing our teeth.
We are going to dig into exactly why that happens, the neuroscience of why your brain freezes when you're insulted, the history of the sharpest tongues in literature, and whether being good at comebacks is actually a sign of intelligence or just a sign that you're mean.
It's time to dissect the art of the witty comeback. Let's get into it.
So I want to start with that feeling I just mentioned, the teeth-brushing regret. You're staring at the mirror and suddenly the perfect sentence lands in your brain, but the person who insulted you is long gone. Is there a name for that specific misery?
There is, and it's surprisingly elegant. It's called l'esprit de l'escalier. It's a French term that translates literally to staircase wit.
Staircase wit. I like that.
It comes from the 18th century French philosopher Denis Diderot. In his essay Paradoxe sur le comédien, he tells the story of being at a dinner party where a statesman made a critical remark that left him speechless. Diderot writes that he was so overwhelmed he couldn't think straight. It was only when he had left the party and walked down the stairs to the ground floor that the perfect retort came to him.
But by then, you're at the bottom of the stairs. The party's upstairs. It's too late to go back up and say it.
Precisely. And Diderot actually gives us the biological reason for this even back in the 1700s. He said that a, quote, sensitive man, when overwhelmed by an argument, loses his head. Today, neuroscientists would call that an amygdala hijack.
Right, the fight or flight response. So when someone insults you, your brain perceives it as a threat, just like a physical attack.
That's it. Your amygdala fires up, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your body is preparing to punch someone or run away, not to construct a complex linguistic reversal involving irony and syntax. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, wordplay, and impulse control, essentially gets throttled. You literally cannot think.
So the reason Churchill could deliver that line about the poison tea is, what, he didn't have a fight or flight response? He was just that calm?
It suggests a certain detachment. To be witty in the moment, you have to override that primal defensive reaction. You have to remain cool enough to process the language. There's actually some fascinating research using fMRI scans that shows humor comprehension involves the dorsal striatum and the ventral striatum, areas linked to reward and ambiguity processing. But to produce it under fire, you need a brain that doesn't panic.
It's almost like a martial art. You have to use the opponent's momentum against them rather than blocking the punch directly.
That is the perfect analogy. If you look at the structure of a great comeback, it's rarely a denial. If someone says, "You're an idiot," and you say, "No, I'm not," that's a block. It's weak. It stops the flow. A witty comeback accepts the premise and then twists it.
Give me an example of that dynamic, accepting the premise.
Take another famous exchange, this time involving the playwright, George Bernard Shaw, and allegedly Churchill again, though historians argue over whether this specific letter exchange happened exactly this way. Shaw invites Churchill to his opening night, writing, "Enclosed are 2 tickets to the first night of my new play. Bring a friend, if you have one."
Ouch. The premise there is Churchill is unlikable and friendless.
Right. A weak response would be, "I have plenty of friends." But the comeback was, "Cannot possibly attend first night, will attend second if there is one."
That is brilliant. He accepts the insult about the friend, ignores it, and pivots to attacking the viability of the play itself. It's lethal efficiency.
And notice the brevity. Shakespeare said, "Brevity is the soul of wit." And he was scientifically correct. The brain finds humor in the sudden resolution of incongruity.
If you have to explain the comeback, the dopamine hit in the listener's brain dissipates. You need that snap.
We can't talk about brevity and snap without bringing up the Algonquin Round Table. I feel like they are the Avengers of witty comebacks.
Oh, absolutely. New York City, 1920s. You have this group of writers, Dorothy Parker, Robert Benchley, Alexander Woolcott, meeting for lunch every day at the Algonquin Hotel. They essentially treated conversation as a blood sport.
Dorothy Parker is the one who always stands out to me. Her reputation was so fearsome that people were actually afraid to go to the bathroom when she was around because they knew she'd roast them the second they left the table.
With good reason. There's a story about Parker holding a door open for a younger, very arrogant socialite. The socialite breezes past her and sneers, "Age before beauty." She thought she had won.
That's a tough one to beat in the split second you're walking through a door.
Parker smiled and followed her through, saying, "Pearls before swine."
Man, that is just, it's biblical, it's literary, and it's calling her a pig, all in 3 words. But this brings up a darker point I want to explore. Is this actually admirable, or is it just mean? Aristotle had some thoughts on this, didn't he?
He did. In Rhetoric, Aristotle defines wit as educated insolence. I think that's such a telling phrase. He recognized that for something to be truly witty, it usually has to have a victim. It's a display of dominance. The superiority theory of humor, which Thomas Hobbes later expanded on, suggests that we laugh because we feel a sudden glory arising from the realization that we are better than someone else.
So when we laugh at Parker destroying that socialite, we're laughing because we're glad we aren't the socialite. We're on the winning team.
Exactly. And there's a risk there. If you're always the person with the witty comeback, you might be admired, but you might not be liked. There's a fine line between a wit and a bully. At the Algonquin, they were famous, but they were also incredibly lonely people. Dorothy Parker's poetry is full of references to suicide and despair. The wit was a shield.
A shield against what?
Against vulnerability. If I can make a joke about how terrible my life is or how stupid you are, I don't actually have to feel the pain of the situation. It's a defense mechanism. Psychologists talk about affiliative humor, which brings people together, versus aggressive humor, which puts others down to elevate the self. The art of the comeback is almost always aggressive humor.
But doesn't it serve a social function? I mean, think about Oscar Wilde. He used wit to expose the hypocrisy of Victorian society. It wasn't just being mean, it was subversive. He was punching up.
That's the crucial distinction. Punching up versus punching down. Wilde is a great example. His comebacks were often directed at the rigid, boring, moralistic upper class. When he said, "Work is the curse of the drinking classes," he's flipping a moral judgment on its head. He's mocking the Protestant work ethic.
Or his line about the critics, "The public is wonderfully tolerant, it forgives everything except genius." That's arrogance, sure, but it's also a commentary on how society treats innovators.
And that's why Wilde endures. His wit had a philosophy behind it. It wasn't just, "You're ugly." It was, "Your entire worldview is boring and restrictive." True wit reveals a truth that polite society is trying to ignore. A mere insult just causes pain. A witty comeback causes a revelation.
I want to pivot to the modern day because I feel like the internet should be the golden age of the comeback. We have all the time in the world. You can stare at a tweet for 10 minutes, craft the perfect response, edit it, and then send it. We shouldn't have l'esprit de l'escalier anymore because the staircase is infinite. We live on the staircase.
And yet, I'd argue the quality of wit has declined. We have the clapback culture now, but if you look at a lot of viral roasts on social media, they lack that clever incongruity we talked about earlier. They're often just loud, performative rudeness.
Why is that? Is it because the stakes are lower?
I think it's because the risk is removed. When Churchill insulted Lady Astor, he was standing 3 feet away from her. He had to look her in the face. There is a physical tension there that sharpens the mind. On the internet, you're shouting into a void. Also, nuance is dead online. Oscar Wilde's paradoxes required you to think for a second. On TikTok or X, if you have to think for a second, you've already scrolled past.
That's a depressing thought, that we're trading wit for, what, memes?
Memes are a form of wit, but they're collaborative. A comeback is usually a solo act.
But I don't think wit is dead. I think it's just evolving. Look at stand-up comedy. Crowd work is huge right now on social media. Clips of comedians destroying hecklers. That is pure, high-stakes, high-speed wit.
That's true. When a heckler shouts something and the comic dismantles them in 3 seconds, that is the same skill set Churchill had. It's that lack of amygdala hijack.
There's a great example from a comedian. I think it might have been Jimmy Carr, who is known for his brutal heckler put-downs. A heckler shouted, "Hi, Mom's dead," trying to make him feel bad during a joke.
Oh, that's a conversation stopper.
Right. Most people would freeze. But the comic just looks at him and says, "I didn't know you could get cell service down there. It's dark, it's shocking, but it's undeniably quick. It reclaims the room."
So for the listeners who, like me, are tired of thinking of the perfect response 3 days later, is this learnable, or are you just born with a faster prefrontal cortex?
It is partially learnable. Improv classes actually help a lot. The core rule of improv is yes and. That is the DNA of a comeback. You accept the reality presented to you, yes, and you add a twist, and. If you practice that mental motion of accepting rather than blocking, you get faster.
So instead of panicking, you lean into the skid.
Exactly. Also, read more. Read Woodhouse, read Wilde, read Twain. Wit is a language. You have to have the vocabulary loaded in your brain so that when the moment comes, you're not searching for words. You're just assembling them.
I suppose there's also value in silence. Sometimes the best comeback is just staring at someone until they realize how stupid they sound.
That is the nuclear option of comebacks. It's what the comedian Jack Benny used to do. He would just put his hand on his cheek and stare. It forces the other person to sit in the awkwardness they created. It's a power move.
I love that. We've covered Diderot on the stairs, Churchill in Parliament, and the Mean Girls of the Algonquin. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that wit isn't just about being funny. It's about paying attention. You have to be listening so closely to what the other person is saying that you can dismantle it from the inside.
That's the irony. The best insulters are actually the best listeners. You can't destroy an argument you haven't understood.
We'll leave it there. If you think of a witty comeback to this episode, don't wait until you're at the bottom of the stairs to tell us.
Or do. We can relate.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the sharpest minds in history, send this episode to the smartest person you know, or the person who really needs to work on their insults.